Hey everybody, I'm actually putting in a full day's work today. It'll be, I don't know, probably 10 hours by the time I decide I can't do it anymore. Just working on the comic. Um, I've been listening to like a multi-hour, like 2.5 hour interview with Nick Land, who's a philosopher, I guess. And he was one of he was I guess, a collaborator with Mencius Moldbug. They didn't, I don't think they were physically proximate. I think they were just, bouncing ideas off one another's writing. But listening to him on this podcast, and, they're supposedly talking about accelerationism. And accelerationism is this idea that, rather than trying to put the brakes on the excesses of capitalism and, push back in the direction of human emancipation, fuck it. Just, let capitalism do its thing until it breaks and, push it faster, push it, forward more. Somebody's come to lock the door here. I have my key. You can lock it. So, of this, I didn't listen to the whole 2.5 hours, but I've listened to more than an hour of it. And, other than a few scraps, they're referencing Deleuze and Guattari, authors who not only have I not read, I refuse to read. All of the like Derrida and all of the French intellectuals from the mid 20th century that the philosophy departments and young people online are just so enamored with. To me, when I hear it, it sounds like they're saying nothing at all. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and grant that they probably are saying something. But I will not grant them the benefit of the doubt and saying that they're saying anything that couldn't be said using non-specialist language. I'm willing to use specialized terms when you've convinced me that they're necessary, when vernacular English is demonstrably insufficient or clumsy. Sure, I'll adopt a couple, jargony terms for the sake of facilitating a discussion, but, that whole genre of language just seems to me, obfuscation. It's using 10 words when 2 would work, and it's using, references to people who are long dead and who were themselves quite obscure, and I think deliberately obscure, rather than just, saying what you mean. And so what I took from this conversation between this podcaster and Nick Land, I can condense into just a few minutes because, it just, there didn't seem to be much there. They seemed to pause and take a long time and really try to reach for the right words to put together these very, very long, very complex, compound sentences that to me don't contain much information at all. I find that very frustrating. But some of the things that they did talk about was, that I could understand and reproduce for you here just talking into my phone. One is the idea that the encapsulation of accelerationism that I just gave you, just let capitalism do its thing until it breaks, and don't bother with all of this leftist pushback, because really that's just slowing down the process of capitalism. It's slowing the gears of capitalism, but it's certainly not going to stop them. It's not going to derail them. It's not going to break them. It's not going to take us in a different direction. It's just slowing things down. We might as well just push through it. That encapsulation they describe as a vulgar encapsulation. And I'm not sure they use the word vulgar, maybe simplistic, I don't know exactly what words they use, but an inadequate, insufficient encapsulation of the idea of accelerationism. So I'm thinking, okay, great, enlighten me. What's a superior formulation of this idea? And they don't give it. And it's not that they gave it and I just didn't understand it because, they said it in too complex a way, making reference to authors I haven't read. No, they just didn't go there. So anyway, capitalism. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives, in Mid-March, her husband bought millions of dollars worth of Microsoft stock. In late March, which is to say a few days later, the Pentagon awarded a $20 billion contract to Microsoft to supply augmented reality headsets to soldiers over the coming decade. Coincidence? Who knows? But, as Crystal Ball said in Rising today, who knows? It doesn't matter if this is actual insider trading. It looks like it could be. And Nancy Pelosi, you're worth $100 million already. You're old. Why do you need more? And why do you, as the Speaker of the House of Representatives, need to make these sort of transactions? I know it was her husband who actually purchased the stock. Did Nancy Pelosi have knowledge of this contract? This Pentagon contract to Microsoft? Did she tell her husband about it? We can't prove that she did, but it sure looks fishy. And why? I mean, if you're going to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives, why not just do that? You're already filthy fucking rich. Why do you have to make it look as though you were using your position of insider knowledge to further enrich yourself when you're already fucking gross in your excessive wealth? Why? Why do that? But is capitalism broken? It doesn't seem to be broken. Is it running off the rails because we fed it, shoveled coal into the fire? Doesn't seem like it. It seems like it is firmly on the track and hurtling down the line, and there is no end in sight. And I have no reason to expect that, that just letting it do its thing is going to produce some phase change where we bootstrap up to some other level of existence. I don't see it. Now, on a different episode of this same podcast that I was listening to today, he was talking with some people who are working with Urbit. I don't know if you know about Urbit, but it's supposedly, it uses the blockchain and it allows everybody to, I guess, in theory, in hope, in the future, replicate all of the functionality of all the stuff that we use. What they call this Frankenstein stack of different apps. Facebook, Twitter, Google with Gmail, Instagram. I could just sit here and just think of all the social apps that I can think of, but that won't be a very long list, and it might not include the one that you like. I don't do TikTok. I tried Parler, and I hated it because it looked like Twitter, and I hate Twitter. Hate the interface. Anyway, the idea is that all of these things will be replicated. The functionality and the ability to interact with other people will be replicated in this environment, it's an operating system, and it's also what? It's a suite of services that are decentralized and powered by the blockchain, and you own all your information, and you can collect information on yourself and store it in a way that is useful to you. Whereas, Twitter collects a bunch of information about you, but they don't give you access to it. It's hard to find your own old tweets. But, people who are dedicated to destroying you, destroying your reputation or finding something to get you fired, they will dig through your old tweets. I don't know how they do it. It has never occurred to me to try to dig up dirt on somebody by going through their Twitter feed. I mean, I just, one, don't have the patience for it, and two, I'm just not in the business of trying to harm people because they've said something that I don't like. But, for me, the whole thing starts with Unix, and I don't run Unix, or Linux, I suppose I should say. There is a way to get into a, Linuxy-like environment in Windows 10, but until it's just an app that I can install and run, as long as it requires any sort of technical expertise whatsoever, I'm not interested. And yet, I remember the internet of the 90s. I remember Usenet news groups, I remember listservs, I remember multi-user simulated habitats, which were these text-based virtual worlds. And I remember internet relay chat. And these things, they did take a little putting up with clunky interfaces and a little technical know-how to enter into, and that minor filter, that minor hurdle kept out most people. So, it was a very self-selected group. And it seems to me that if I were to make the effort to find a way to interact with other people using Urbit, that it might be a very satisfying experience. But I also know that I'm old and cranky and have zero patience for technical frustrations, and I just don't see it happening. Unless anybody watching this would volunteer to help, I would appreciate it. All right. At least it's an overcast day and it's not particularly warm and it's a Tuesday. So the motorcycles and the loud cars and the loud trucks are not out in force like they would be on a nice day. For this I give thanks. All right, catch you later.